Why everyone is wrong about the new BRICS currency. Now, as the world seems to be inching closer to World War III, the real war isn't with Russia or China. It's something that's actually much larger. And in fact, the wars aren't even the problems. They're only the symptoms. Because to control the world, you must control the money. And as the US has weaponized the global monetary system against Russia and China, and of course, any other adversary, a new system is rapidly being deployed and a new one is to be announced next month. So in this video, I'm gonna break down what's really happening with the international monetary system, the historical parallels that show us the roadmap for where we're going. I'm gonna break down the new BRICS system that's being launched next month and how almost everyone is wrong about it. I'm gonna explain how it's gonna work, the chance of success, what it means for the dollar, and what I think is really the best and the most logical step. So let's go. All right, welcome back. If you're new to the channel, my name is Mark Moss, and of course I make these videos to change the way you think about money. Because it's hard to tell what the heck is going on right now, and we are witnessing the birth of a new monetary system. Well, the death of an old one and the birth of a new one, and let's talk about that. Now, a little bit going back about me, the reason why I care about this so much is because after barely surviving the 2008 great financial crash, if you've heard my story, you know that's when I became hyper-focused on the monetary system. And I mean like focused like my life, like my family's life depended on it. And after beginning to learn how it all worked, I became a gold bug. I realized that it was the endless printing of fiat currencies, and it was the Fed's and other central bank policies of constantly manipulating the price and the supply of money that continue to cause even greater booms and bust cycles over and over and over. Now, studying central bank monetary policies and historical cycles, it's all led to a single conclusion, and it's really more of a fact than an opinion, and that is that we're on the verge of the collapse of not just the United States dollar, as you hear so many people talking about it, but really we're witnessing the breakdown and collapse of the entire international monetary system. Now, while many nations have had the reserve currency, it was always backed by gold, really all the way up to about 1913, which is when the Federal Reserve Bank was created, which really marked the creation of a new monetary system. And just like the averages, they last about 30-ish years. So then in 1945, a new monetary system was born. And that was born at the Bretton Woods Conference, of course, organized by good old JP Morgan and the other powerful bankers. Now, if you want to read up on that, check out the book titled The Creature from Jekyll Island, which breaks all this down in great detail, or watch the video interview I did with Nomi Prinz, who understands this as good or better than anyone. I'm going to link to it in the description down below. It's definitely worth your time to watch if you want to learn about that. But going back to the Bretton Woods Conference, the dollar was officially designated to be the world's reserve currency, and in which the dollar was to be backed by gold at an exchange rate of $35 per ounce of gold. And then all the other currencies of the world would be pegged to the dollar, thereby all the currencies of the world were to be still backed by gold. Now, of course, most of you know that that only lasted about another, yes, 30-ish years. And so in 1971, then President Richard Nixon took the US and of course, by extension, the entire world off the gold standard. And so the global monetary system entered its next, and still currently its existing system, for which, for this time in history, it's just a fiat money system, which means it's only a paper money system. There's no gold backing. This means that all the currencies of the world would not be backed by gold, and they're now all based on just a floating exchange rate, all right, without a golden anchor. And now today, the existing monetary system is over 50 years old. So the world's way overdue for a new monetary system. And this system, it's been breaking down fast, but it was really taken out behind the woodshed and put down with the unprecedented sanctions that the US and its allies imposed on Russia following the invasion of Ukraine. Of course, that created a massive urgency for every other government in the world to scramble to move towards a new monetary system. Now, while the sanctions take many forms, many effects, many different countries and areas of commerce and trade, it hits them all differently. But what they all have in common is the use of the US dollar as the principal weapon. Now, every nation in the world was put on notice that as long as they're dependent on dollars for holding assets or for purchasing global commodities, that they're going to be under the control of those who control the dollar payment systems, which is basically the US, maybe with some help from the big European and Japanese central banks. Now, this is most of the reason or the catalyst for the fairly rapid development of this new BRICS currency, which is set to be announced next month. And while Russia and China have been de-dollarizing for over the last decade, I think that if the severe anti-Russian sanctions imposed by the US and its allies didn't happen, well, maybe we wouldn't see this big move taking place right now, at least not so rushed. Now, it's because all the trust in the current monetary system was lost in an instant. My dad made sure that I understood from the time that I was a kid that it takes a lifetime to build your reputation, and you can ruin it in a single instant. And that's exactly what the US did. Now, this doesn't mean that the dollar will lose its reserve status overnight. So if you want to see how this plays out, if you want to see where the dollar is ultimately heading and the path and the timeframes, then we just have to look back into history to see when this happened before. If we look back to how the US dollar took over the status from the UK's pound sterling, we can see that it was a process and not an event. Now, even though it was officially called out in 1944 at the Bretton Woods Conference, the pound really started to lose its status, about 30 years before, right around 1914, right around World War I. Now, the 1944 Bretton Woods Conference was merely a recognition of the process of the dollar reserve's dominance that was already decades in the making. And so, just like with the pound sterling's loss of status, we can see the same slippage in the dollar's role as the leading global reserve currency. And it's not really something that's going to happen overnight. It's also a process. But the unprecedented dollar sanctions against Russia really exaggerated and accelerated the process. And although the process is relatively gradual, no investor should be surprised if it happens sooner rather than later. It's like the quote from Ernest Hemingway's 1926 novel, The Sun Also Rises. He said, one of the characters in there asked, "How'd you go bankrupt?" And they said, well, two ways. They said, gradually, and then suddenly. Now, the dollar could lose its reserve status gradually and then suddenly. But this isn't about the dollar losing its reserve status. It's about the entire global fiat paper money system losing its status. It's about the loss of faith and trust in the entire global monetary system and a brand new system emerging. Now, back to the reputation and trust. Once you've lost it, what do you do? If no one's going to trust the fiat money system of any nation, if the people won't use or accept the money, what can be done to restore the trust? Well, it's sort of like we might need a trustless system. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. But because while I think this is the future, the nations of the world have something up their sleeves. They think they have a way to restore trust, and that is going back to something old. That's right, a gold-backed system. So enter the rise of the BRICS and their gold-linked currency. Notice I said linked, not backed. All right, but this is scheduled to be announced August 22nd, and I think there's a really big misconception by most people as to what it is and what it isn't and how it works. So let me break it down. Now, if they get this off the ground, the keyword if, right? If they get it off the ground, it's something that I think we really want to keep an eye on because it is something that has the potential to really affect the United States dollar. Now, I've talked about the BRICS a lot, so I'm not going to go back all through that. But the BRICS nations, they're a big, credible alternative to the Western hegemony acting together. They represent one pole of a new multipolar or a maybe bipolar, probably a multipolar world. But let's clear one thing up. It's not a new gold standard, but it does have something in common with gold. So there's been all kinds of hype. There's all kinds of misunderstandings about how this new currency is going to work. So I want to clear up some of the confusion. Now, like I said, people are saying that it's like a gold-backed yuan, right? And that's going to be the new global reserve currency. But I don't think that's a possibility at all because China, even though they've been adding tons and tons of gold reserves, it doesn't have nearly enough gold to back up their money supply. There's also no significant yuan-denominated bond market, so there's really nothing to invest in, right? You can't have a reserve currency without a huge liquid bond market. And of course, only the US Treasury market really fits that bill, maybe to a little bit of a lesser extent, potentially the bond markets of Japan and Germany, maybe Italy qualify a little bit, really not so much. And so there will be no Chinese reserve currency. There's nothing to invest into with or without gold. And I would say the same is true for the Russian ruble or any other currency or any of the other BRICS members. But here's what I think will happen. The BRICS will launch a new currency. I don't know what it's called, but it will be a neutral currency from all the BRICS nations. So some neutral currency, let's call it neutral. We'll call it that for now. All right. But it's not going to be on a gold standard. Instead, its value will be determined by a reference to the weight of gold. All right. Not the price, but the weight, sort of like the pound sterling. That's how it's got its name, right? So here's how it would likely work. The value of one neutral coin will be determined by a specific weight of gold. So let's say like one neutral equals 1/10 of an ounce of gold. So for easy numbers, so then 1/10 of an ounce of gold is worth about $200 USD. Now remember, this isn't an exchange rate, but rather it's a reference point. But if the price of gold moves up, this would mean that the USD is actually going down when it's compared to the neutral, because it's tied to the weight of gold, which of course the weight of gold is tied to the price. It will really show the world how the dollar would be collapsing, like you'll see other currencies are collapsing against the dollar today. Now, this would work out pretty good for the BRICS members like Russia and China, who are the two largest gold producers in the world, and they're ranked 6th and 7th respectively among the 100 nations with gold reserves. And sorry if you're in Canada, you have 0 gold reserves. And it's not just Russia and China building up massive gold reserves. In fact, central banks around the world bought a record 1,136 tons of gold last year, which is the greatest amount since 1950. And so you should be asking yourself why. And we're also seeing countries starting to demand their gold reserves to be returned back to their own vaults. Now, right now, most foreign gold is held at either the Federal Reserve Bank in New York or the Bank of England. But countries from Vietnam to Brazil, they want their gold back because they fear that the US or the UK might seize it if the price goes up and the dollar collapse begins, which of course is what happens. It happens many times in recent history. Recently, Venezuela, Afghanistan, they've had their gold seized. Now, if this goes into effect, this will be a very sudden upheaval of the international monetary system coming in a matter of weeks. This is the suddenly part. Since the currency will be gold pegged, gold referenced, and since participants in the scheme will continue to buy gold in order to maintain the needed backing support for the new currency, the price of gold will remain really strong and it will steadily continue to grow. Now, if we think back to like a first principles level, the problem here is trust. And trying to peg or even refer to a gold price is one way trying to restore trust to a system, I suppose. But at the end of the day, it still requires massive amounts of trust. Do they really have the gold? Is it real gold? Is it fake gold? Will they send it to me for a balance of payments? And so many other reasons. And that's why I think it's likely to maybe work in the short term, but in the longer term, the world needs a trustless, decentralized ledger that nobody controls. And the only solution for that in the world today is the Bitcoin ledger, which of course continues to make me bullish on hard assets like gold and Bitcoin. But tell me what you think. Gold or Bitcoin? Do you think this will work? And will it be the end of the dollar? Let me know in the comments down below. Of course, as always, hit me up with some thumbs up if you like the video. If you don't, give me thumbs down. That's okay, but at least tell me why in the comments. Check out this video with Nomi Prinz. We'll link to it down here. And that's it. To your success. I'm out.